like you can build a couple of new towers and an extra moat at Kamalot. Morning consult poll, which Trump still led a week ago today, 47-45, now shows Vice President Harris ahead 47-46. And yes, it is all within the margin of error, and nevertheless, it is a 3-point swing in 1 week. And just as importantly, over the weekend, her net favorability score jumped into positive territory in the Ipsos poll, a +1. In the new morning consult poll today, 50% of voters view her favorably, 46% unfavorably. That is a net of +4. And in our fractured time and landscape, that is landslide territory, and nothing that Biden or Trump ever came close to. And as Morning Consult notes, her popularity score swung by 12 points since last week, driven mostly by independents. A week ago, 31% of independents viewed Kamala Harris favorably. It is now 48%. Again, Harris is viewed positively by half of all voters, and her net score is 4. From the Ipsos poll, Trump is viewed favorably by just 36%, and his net score is -16. Vance is at 24% approval. He's underwater by 15. Gurgle, gurgle, fascists. Back to that horse race number, 47-46 Harris. The 47% for Kamala Harris is also 2 points higher than Joe Biden's high water mark in the Morning Consult tracking poll dating back to 2022. And the third parties are vanishing, only 4% total, looking at Kennedy, West, Stein, or any of the other Trump stalking horses. Kamala Harris is also killing it in the stodgier polls. Fox surveyed 4 swing states. Harris is up by 6 in Minnesota. They are tied in Michigan and Pennsylvania. She trails by 1 point in Wisconsin. They also got favorability numbers in those states, and Harris is averaging 49% favorable there. On July 3rd, the Wall Street Journal poll, right after the debate, had it Trump 48, Biden 42. The new Wall Street Journal poll, Trump 49, Harris 47. Trump margins in Atlas Intel, in Harris X, in SurveyMonkey. Those margins now down to 1 or 2 points. This is during Trump's double honeymoon after the assassination attempt and his convention. The Angus Reid poll. That is a nonprofit polling outfit from Canada, hilariously mislabeled in one accounting as the Angus Reid poll. Angus Reid has it Harris 44-42. The race to the White House polling average, Trump ahead by 1 2/10 of a point, averaging all polls. And just one more number before your ears start to bleed. In February, Ipsos managed to measure party enthusiasm for voting. The Republicans were 18 points ahead of the Democrats in enthusiasm. The Democrats are now 6 points ahead of the Republicans in enthusiasm. The rain may never fall till after sundown. By 8 the morning fog must disappear. In short, there's simply not a more congenial spot for happily ever aftering than here in Kamalot. Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Of course, Trump meant if Christians voted for him now, they would not have to vote again in 2028 because he meant there wouldn't be elections. Or maybe even more likely, because he meant there wouldn't be elections in 2028 that he could lose. Because 1, he has said this before, and 2, his minions have been actively at work for a year now to make him eligible for a third term. And 3, they are anti-democracy. And one of the principles of being anti-democracy is to make sure you can't lose elections. And most importantly, 4, we all understand that Trump is running because if he does not win the 2024 election and go to the White House, he will instead go to prison. and he will die there. And if that is true in 2024, guess what? It would also be true in 2028. It would be slightly more difficult to prosecute Trump in 2029 because of statutes of limitations and Supreme Court corruption. On the other hand, think of all the new crimes Trump has vowed to commit between now and then. One of the few realities that Dementia J. Trump still understands is it's the White House or the Big House. Next year or 4.5 years from now, it is why he's running. So the translation of what he told the Bible thumpers over the weekend is not as complicated as all the fascists, and sadly, as many of us are saying. It is this: Christians, vote for me now. I will spend the next 4 years turning the United States into a Christian theocracy. You know, the way Hitler promised to turn Germany into a Christian theocracy. And I will make sure you and I can't lose the next election. Either we will fix it so that only Christians will be allowed to vote, or we just won't bother voting. We just won't bother having an election. I'll just stay in power and appoint my own successor, J.D. Vance, a good Christian who fears God. Now, he may fear upholstery charges for damaged couches a little more, but he also fears God. So listen to what Trump said to the Bible thumpers in the context of all that. If he's not president, he's liable to die in prison. Think about that. Think about that in the context of the Christian, theocratic, religious states of America, and you'll get it clearly.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Also, he did not say he wasn't a Christian. He said, I'm a Christian. But his neurological problems are beginning to migrate more deeply into his speech center. And that's the result. What, he's going to tell a bunch of Christians he's not a Christian? I mean, even if that's true, why wouldn't he lie to them? Of course he told them he was a Christian. He also told them this whole scenario before. He said this exact same thing on the 22nd of June.
Do you know the power you have if you would vote? It wouldn't even be. So you got to get out and vote just this time. I don't care. In 4 years, you don't have to vote, okay? In 4 years, don't vote. I don't care. But we'll have it all straightened out, so it'll be much different.
What's changed since that recording on the 22nd of June? Why did the newer version of I'll have it all fixed, you won't have to vote in 2028, why did that hit when the earlier one didn't? Because the thing that some of us never saw and others of us only saw vaguely was that modern American political journalism really is 100% gotcha moments. Used to be 50-50. When I started, it was still 25-75 non-gotcha. But the machine now has only the one setting. And with President Biden out of the race and Vice President Harris not only in a honeymoon, but cleverly being just one of a chorus of Democrats, all sticking to one message and one vibe, and sticking to about 3 or 4 catchphrases, the entirety of the media gotcha machine is now pointed at Trump. They all covered that speech about not having to vote. They all covered him claiming Harris doesn't like Jewish people when her husband and her kids are Jewish. They all covered the weirdness of J.D. Vance. They all covered the ubiquity of the word weird. They all covered the uncertainty about what hit Trump's ear. They are all covering the appointment of Congressman Clay Ghost Bus Higgins to the House committee to investigate Trump's ear. To some degree, we got them to cover the bullet, no bullet story, belatedly but successfully. Several generations of American reporters and editors know no forms of political journalism besides horse races and gotcha moments. Kamala Harris has excited the horse race journalists the way a divan excites J.D. Vance. Ooh, we have a new leader. Yay! And in the absence of Joe Biden, doddering J. Trump is the exclusive national distributor of gotcha moments. Like when he just proposed having football coaches and stock car race team leaders tell the military who to bomb. Or he otherwise screwed up at his most recent speeches.
Roger Penske, like a great guy, too. He won 20 Indianapolis 500s. This guy wins all the time. I mean, we appreciate talent. I said, let me use these guys to guide our military a little bit. When you can win so many races, that's okay, you know? You guide. Same thing with coaches. You take some of the greatest football coaches, you put them at a table. What do you like, coach? Because in its own way, it's not so much really different, which is incapable of solving even the smallest problem. The simplest of problems we can no longer solve. We can't do anything. We are an institute and a powerful death penalty. We will put this on. That means defeating Kamala Harris in a landslide.
You remember Landslide? Mr. Slade. He was one of the characters on the Flintstones. He's nuts. So the media, robbed of an easy, and there is no other way to say this, slow-moving target in Joe Biden, not only has repositioned itself against Trump, but it has found Biden's replacement, and that's not Vice President Harris. Biden's replacement is this psycho J.D. Vance. My God! This guy is like 6 Sarah Palins standing on each other's shoulders wearing a Dan Quayle disguise. He wants to control which citizens of which states are allowed to travel to other states. He has single-handedly established cat ladies and cat gentlemen as an activated Democratic voting bloc. He allows people to think, Christ, this guy would be one fat burger heartbeat away from the presidency. He used to be named James Donald Bowman. Then he changed his name to Jimmy Hamill. Then he changed his name to J.D. Vance. He used to think he was gay, and there's no evidence he ever had sectional with a couch. But more importantly, there's also no evidence that in 2 weeks since he became the nominee, that he's done a damn thing to dispel that image. I want to see polling. I want to see what percentage of this country thinks J.D. Vance is a couch potato, if you get my drift. And I want to send everybody who says yes a thank you gift. So far, so good. And more seriously, this strange, deeply uncomfortable in his own skin weirdo attacked from the far right before his selection because he had a Hindu wife from San Diego, a Hindu wife from San Diego who reportedly hated Trump. He has done nothing to defend her. In fact, J.D. Vance, if that is your real name, threw her under the bus on the Megyn, how many camera filters are you using today, Kelly podcast bus.
Look, I love my wife so much. I love her because she's who she is. Obviously, she's not a white person, and we've been attacked by some white supremacists over that.
Obviously, she's not a white person. If you say that without a trace of emotion or anger or support or defense, guess what? You're a racist. And oh, by the way, as David Korn of Mother Jones found out, right after Trump's inauguration in 2017, J.D. Vance, that is your real name, went to the University of Chicago and said some of Trump's voters are racists.
Definitely some people who voted for Trump were racist, and they voted for him for racist reasons.
I don't know how many Trump voters are going to hear that and be offended by it, and how many are going to say, cool, cool. But Vance's problem with racism is, based on his remarks about his wife, he is a racist who draws some sort of excitement from someone who isn't a member of his group. In JD's case, his group would be Sofas, couches, settees, Chesterfields, ottomans, daybeds, chaise lounges, and of course, love seats. J.D. Vance love seats. Hey, remember the Tucker Carlson, Kevin McCarthy insistences that there were hidden truths in the unreleased video from January 6th? First, remember Tucker Carlson and Kevin McCarthy? Well, they were right. The 3-decade congressional reporter Jamie Dupree with a startling discovery, no less than Trump's lawyer Kenny the Cheese, Ken Chesebro, literally caught on tape trying to be the courier for the fake electors documents. January 5th, 2021. I'm going to quote liberally from Mr. Dupree's reporting on his latest Substack. Quote, buried in the thousands of hours of U.S. Capitol security tapes being released by House Republicans is video evidence of Donald Trump's campaign trying to get slates of fake GOP electors to Vice President Mike Pence on January 5th, 2021. The last-ditch attempt involved attorney Kenneth Chesebro, one of the architects of the fake elector scheme, and G. Michael Brown, the deputy director of Election Day operations for Trump's 2020 campaign. Mr. Dupree continues, with fake GOP documents from Michigan and Wisconsin missing in the mail, Brown flew to Washington, D.C. on January 5th with a backup copy of fake elector certificates from Michigan. The same day, bogus elector documents from Wisconsin were carried on a plane by a part-time GOP aide who gave them to Chesebro outside the Trump Hotel. Chesebro and Brown then walked to Capitol Hill to deliver the envelopes. The U.S. Capitol Police security camera system, which stretches far and wide across Capitol Hill, first picked up Chesebro and Brown walking towards the Capitol at 3:40 p.m. on January 5th. The cameras would track the duo for the next 25 minutes. Chesebro was carrying one set of fake GOP elector documents in a familiar manila oversized business envelope. The other set was in a white FedEx envelope. By 3:50, a pair of staffers came outside from the office of Representative Mike Kelly, Republican of Pennsylvania. That's when the bogus GOP elector documents from Michigan and Wisconsin were handed over. After a short chat, the two aides from Rep. Kelly's office, now carrying the envelopes with the fake GOP elector documents, headed back through security at the Longworth building. It was their job to deliver the envelopes to Senate officials for use at the joint session of Congress on January 6th, all part of Trump's plan to have Vice President Pence overturn the 2020 election results to keep Trump in office. Outside, Brown took a selfie with the U.S. Capitol in the background to mark the moment. Mission accomplished, he wrote in a text. As an aside, whatever you do, particularly if it relates to politics, never, ever say mission accomplished. To resume Mr. Dupree's account, back inside, the two staffers from the office of Rep. Mike Kelly, R. Pennsylvania, carrying the two envelopes handed over by Chesebro and Brown, took the underground tunnels over to the U.S. Capitol. Their destination was the office of the Senate parliamentarian, which was ransacked a day later on January 6th by supporters of Donald Trump. Security video shows the aides dropping off the fake elector envelopes at 4:04 p.m., but before they could get far, Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough ran around the corner to catch the two men. After a short discussion in the hallway, the Kelly aides returned to her office and took back the fake elector documents. End quote. Those men then tried and failed to deliver the fake documents to Mike Pence's office. The next day, they would try to get them to Pence via Senator Ron Johnson without success. Another aside here is, if you need success, do not involve Ron Johnson. I have liberally stolen Mr. Dupree's work, so I encourage you to go to his Substack, jamiedupree.substack, JAMIEDUPREE. One word. He has illustrated all this with no less than 26 freeze frames from the previously unreleased January 6th video that the Republicans were good enough to release. It's marvelous. Phew. There's one other Trump legal note to leave them laughing with. Trump has agreed to do what the FBI calls a victim interview about the assassination attempt. This extends Trump's world record. He has now agreed to do a victim interview with somebody every day since April 27th, 1955. Possibly earlier. Also of interest here, did you know there are two Joe Bidens? That's right. That shortly before the debate, the new one, who they just built somewhere, but they got the blueprints wrong and he's 6'4" instead of 6 feet even, deliberately tanked the debate so that the Democrats could fulfill their evil plan to swap in the obviously more popular Kamala Harris, because this was all a Democratic plot involving thousands of us. I wish. This is actually posited by one of the deep thinkers on the lunatic right. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown, I was waiting to do my annual retweet on this one subject where I take somebody else's celebration and add modestly, "You're welcome." And it suddenly dawned on me, they didn't send out the tweet this year celebrating their day. The day that MSNBC launched, July 15th, 1996. They just missed the, 28th anniversary. So I'll have to address inexactly the anniversary of the launch of a, if I may say so myself, rather troubled place that somehow never quite lived up to its promise, except perhaps in the years 2006 through 2011, along with another upcoming anniversary over the weekend, one you may not know about, the day MSNBC fired Rachel Maddow. That's coming up in Things I Promised Not to Tell. First, there are still more idiots to talk about, the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Remember Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? The other crazy old guy in the presidential race who has sunk without trace. I mean, where's he been? He's down to 6% in the polls. He's now taking nearly all of his support away from Trump. My friend Major Garrett just interviewed him for CBS, and first of all, I have to congratulate Major for finding him, for getting the proof of life video done with RFK Jr., and I also have to congratulate Major on keeping a straight face throughout this interview. As they put it, RFK Jr. recently apologized to a woman who accused him of sexual assault. When asked if he would have to apologize to other women from his past, the presidential candidate told Major Garrett, quote, "It's quite possible. I'm 70 years old. I had a very rambunctious life." No. That's not rambunctious. That's not rambunctious. Legally, that's not rambunctious. If you have to apologize to multiple women for sexual assault, that's no longer rambunctious. That's Harvey Weinstein or Epstein. That's God. First of all, something's going on in the Kennedy campaign. Instead of campaigning, he has canceled a series of campaign events. He met with Trump to discuss dropping out and what the price would be for endorsing Trump. He's not seeking donations. He's not having fundraising. He's just taking more money from that idiot woman he named as his vice president, Nicole Ditsahan. And there's a joint fundraising committee with the Libertarian Party. I mean, there has to be a point at which Trump bribes Kennedy for his endorsement and his voters. I mean, it just has to happen. It's Trump's last play at this point. Anyway, runner-up, worser, Amy Vandersteel. Stupid person. Trump supporter. I know that's redundant. You may remember her vaguely as a Pizzagate believer and disseminator who thus decided that because she could see a conspiracy in a basement where there was no basement, let alone a conspiracy, she was an investigative reporter. Because those people think that being able to see hallucinations means you're an investigative reporter. She also said she was a member of the Trump 2020 re-election campaign board, and Trump milked that for about 40 days and then finally disavowed her after she insisted that there were replicants and body doubles and 25 million undocumented immigrants, and they said, this dame is too nuts even for us. Well, she now needs to use some of her own investigative skills on math. Amy Vandersteel. Kamala tanks Netflix. Netflix makes a donation to her campaign and the stock tumbles $2 billion in 2 hours, a 40% drop in stock price. Perhaps this would be a good time for a billionaire conservative to come in and buy that liberal-loving platform. What are you doing? Yeah, it wasn't 40%. It was 0.43%. Netflix, which is worth $270 billion, dropped $2.72 a share. Math is tough when you hallucinate about what the answers might be. 3 minus 2 equals Jesus. Yeah, Jesus, you're right. But our winner, and speaking of that, Bill Mitchell. You may remember such films as Bill Mitchell stars on social media as the pro-Trump guy who suddenly went anti-Trump and then went pro-Trump and then pro-Ron DeSantis and then anti-Trump and then anti-DeSantis and then anti-Trump and then he left Twitter and then he quit Twitter and then he deleted his account and then he put it in a new account and he rejoined Twitter. Well, he's now pro-Trump again. But with a twist, he's pro-Trump because there's been a Biden body double. See? He thinks, Bill that is, he thinks people don't know about Photoshop. Bill hasn't even gotten to AI yet. Bill's still working with Photoshop. He has posted a picture that he has captioned, 2024 Biden goes for a walk with 2022 Biden. There are 2 pictures of Joe Biden. One, he's wearing a tan suit. This was shot from the middle distance. Superimposed next to him is another shot of Joe Biden in a blue suit that was shot from closer. So the one in the blue suit looks taller than the one in the brown suit. When everybody laughed at this, Bill reposted it with additional information. The new version of Biden is 6'4", is lankier, and has bigger hands. Clearly a fake who took a dive during the debate. All right, we've now moved from you think that something done with Photoshop that I could do and make a version in which there's one Joe Biden who's 70 feet tall and another Joe Biden who's 7 feet tall and another Joe Biden who's 7 inches tall. I can do that on my iPad, let alone on my laptop. We've moved from that to you want people to believe that the Joe Biden at the debate was clever enough to be a body double, to go out there and convince everybody, including Trump, that he was convince them that he was not deliberately struggling, convince him he was struggling for 90 minutes on the biggest stage in the world, and then, after everything that followed, wait 3 weeks before you dropped out of the presidential race and do this deliberately for some unknown reason that's clear only to Bill Mitchell. You're able to do that, and instead of getting up in front of a national audience on TV and saying, I am Joe Biden and I am capable of being my own body double, and to deliberately make it look like I don't know what I'm talking about for 90 minutes so that I can drop out 3 weeks later to bring in Kamala Harris, I am super Joe Biden. Instead of doing that and being something approaching, I don't know, 10 Einsteins in one head, I don't know, and earning election unanimously, because people would then say, I better vote for this guy. I don't know what he's capable of. He's capable of being his own body double. Instead of doing that, he dropped out. 3 weeks later, Bill, you realize that if there were body doubles, they'd have swapped in a new Trump already who was not fat, insane, and self-destructing, right? Mitchell, today's worst person, or is he, in the world? A body double. Finally, our number one story on the countdown, things I promised not to tell, and back to my favorite topic, me. Well, actually not just me this time. This is an important anniversary for an important TV news show, and I don't mean one of mine. August 3rd, 2007 was, near as I can calculate, the day I first met Rachel Maddow. So August 4th, 2007, 15 years ago, was when I started to push MSNBC to make her a host, specifically the guest host for my show, with an eye towards eventually getting her to host her own show, which would follow mine, which happened almost immediately, just 13 months later. On the other hand, 2 years earlier than that first meeting, August 8th, 2005, was the day MSNBC had cleverly fired Rachel Maddow. Early in 2007, before MSNBC moved to 30 Rockefeller Center in New York from the charms of the row of factory outlet discount stores in which it had been nestled in Secaucus, New Jersey since its inception, my executive producer, Izzy Povich, had walked into my office and asked me if I remembered Rachel Maddow. Of course, isn't she on Carlson's I stopped myself. She had been a regular panelist on Tucker Carlson's last non-Nazi TV program, which incongruously aired right after mine at 9 o'clock on MSNBC. Rick Kaplan, then the ex-president of CNN and shortly to be ex-president of MSNBC, had first foisted this repulsive scumbag on us and then asked me to play his liberal foil in all the Carlson pilot shows, which Kaplan then demanded. One night it dawned on Kaplan that if he made me Carlson's co-host, he could use our initials and title the show TKO. And as he pitched me the idea, he could not have been happier nor more surprised if he had invented the alphabet himself. When I pointed out to Rick Kaplan that I already had a show and it already took me all goddamn day to do it, and I had no desire to add 3 hours to my schedule nor to ever work with Tucker Carlson, he had the new show's producer Bill Wolf search around for other potential liberal foils. Wolf found two: our old sports colleague Max Kellerman and this Air America radio host, Rachel Maddow. Only as Izzy asked me that day if I remembered her did I realize that I had not seen Rachel Maddow in our studios recently in New Jersey. Oh, it's well over a year, she explained. When Tucker's show started to die and they trimmed salary, they had to cut back to just one liberal. They kept Max Kellerman. I found that astonishing, even though I had only met Rachel maybe 3 times in passing, once at Air America's launch party, and we'd interacted superficially for maybe, I don't know, a minute in total. They kept Kellerman over her? Who kept Kellerman? I liked Max, but who would keep Kellerman? Izzy Povich was not sure. We both guessed it was Phil Griffin, who was basically running the place. Anyway, somebody suggested she would make a good guest on almost anything political, and I interrupted Izzy. God, yes, tonight. Izzy laughed and said, I'll go book her. Any segment in particular? And I said we should adhere to our usual high and discerning standards. One of the segments we haven't booked a guest for yet will do. Rachel, of course, was erudite, succinct, knowledgeable, compelling, self-deprecating, and she wasn't another guy. We began to book her to talk about pretty much almost anything every week. Soon it became twice a week. She also had fun on TV without overdoing it. The in-house phrase was, she plays. And she played despite the fact that we were always in different studios. We would either throw her into a one-camera room called the Nook, literally converted from a third-floor broom closet at 30 Rock, or we would rent some time at an all-networks live-shot assembly line studio called Media 3, which was a few blocks further downtown. I would remain on the ever-increasingly antiquated Lazy Susan set at MSNBC in Jersey. And as these appearances started, this was when the love letters to her and to us began to show up on the website The Daily Kos. As the ratings rose that spring and MSNBC's move to New York in October loomed, Phil Griffin had offered me a perk. As long as the viewership totals held, he said I could skip the weary commute to Secaucus on Fridays, I could write the show in my apartment on Central Park South, I could have an early dinner with my cohabitant, Katie Tur, actually in our home, I could walk over to 30 Rock at 7 p.m. and do countdown from that aforementioned Nook. This was balm for my soul, until word came down from the office of the director of news for NBC that for some arcane reason the Nook had to be rebuilt and it would be out of commission for like 2 months. To his credit, Phil Griffin now ponied up. His offer of Jersey Free Friday continued, and he was willing to rent me one of those studios at Media 3 and I could anchor the show from there. Thus did it happen that as I breezed in for the second week in a row to Media 3 at 7:30 on Friday, August 3rd, 2007, and made my way to the makeup room, our now go-to countdown guest, Rachel Maddow, was already sitting in the chair. As mentioned previously, we had met before in passing. We had not met since she had become a regular. She rose instantly and unnecessarily, and as she did and we exchanged pleasantries, I noticed she had one sheet of paper in her hand. It had clearly been computer printed. There was a line or two of text at the top of the page, then about half a sheet's worth of words written by hand. And then there was a second line of computer printed text and another half sheet of longhand. And the back of the paper had the same format. I can read upside down. I mean, I can read a paper or a book when the paper or book is upside down. It's one of my few parlor tricks. It took only a few seconds for me to realize that the computer-printed lines of text were the questions I had composed for Rachel's segment that night. Then, in her excellent penmanship, were the answers to those questions. It looked for all the world like a high school or college short essay exam page. 4 short questions and 4 half-page answers. My astonishment was completely organic. What's that? Rachel was embarrassed. She hid the sheet behind her back. I just do some prep for the show. It's my prep sheet. I don't read from it on the air or anything, but I like to write everything down longhand because it helps me organize my thoughts, and I like to have it in front of me in the studio in case I interrupted her now and said, in case you freeze or you get interrupted or distracted by the idiot host. I pulled from my pocket 4 folded up pages of my own on which I had printed handwritten notes for each of the scheduled interviews. I said, I find it's writing it by hand that really helps here. I think it's some sort of memory trick. Her gasp of astonishment turned into a warm laugh. She and I used the same TV shortcut without knowing it. Now something else popped into my head. I said, you do realize you are more prepared for your 4-minute segment than I am for the entire damn show, right? She laughed again, and I waved my folded crib notes. You do realize that nobody does this except you and me? It's lack of confidence meets paranoia meets fear that you'll forget your good lines. I squinted at her as the thought came to me. Have you ever thought of hosting one of these shows? Rachel suddenly drew her head back as if evading a right cross. What? No, I couldn't. I said, we haven't had a good guest host in a long time. The makeup artist moved to attempt to straighten up my hair. You want to give it a try? She seemed to go a little pale. No, I don't think so. Really? No, but I don't. How difficult could it be if I stepped in here with no experience and suddenly I had the most popular liberal news show? Pick up 2. How good evening, I'm Tom. 3, 2, 1. How difficult could it be if I stepped in here with no experience and suddenly I had the most popular liberal news show? And then I did it again 8 years later. She looked unconvinced. I mean, you already do the prep. What worries you? She looked away from me and mumbled, prompter. I laughed. Did you say prompter? The prompter, the teleprompter. She looked away again. I don't think I could use it. I'm sorry, I said with mock anger. Have you padded your resume? Didn't you get one of them Rhodes scholarship-y things and you go over to England to study stuff and you think you can't learn how to use a teleprompter? For God's sake, I learned to use a teleprompter in 10 minutes from Stuart effing Varney at CNN. There's nothing to it but practice. Rachel was not convinced. I said, get made up, come into the studio, sit with me off camera. I'm just sitting in there reading the show off the teleprompter. Watch, you'll see. Now, let me ask you this. If you knew how to use the teleprompter, if you already knew, would you want to try hosting? Her eyes got a little smaller and she seemed nervous. And very quietly, Rachel Maddow said, yes. We would travel 1 million bureaucratic miles and a year together before we actually sat down for prompter school. After one of her guest hits on a Monday edition of Countdown, she and I, and to their credit, Countdown's technical director, Brian Nailsnick, and much of the crew stayed for an extra half an hour. We put 2 cameras and 2 monitors almost next to each other so she could read the prompter along with me or watch the other monitor to see where my eyes were as I read from the prompter. And then after a while, we fixed it so I could read along with her or watch the other monitor to see where her eyes were as she read. We read my scripts. We read scripts that she had written. I gave her the Tom Snyder prompter trick. Okay, here's the Tom Snyder prompter trick. Try to see and read entire sentences, not individual words. Focus your eyes not on the pane of plastic where the words are projected, but focus several inches beyond it where the lens actually is in the camera. I told her, tonight, this is your freshman year. Tomorrow will be sophomore. Wednesday's junior. Thursday's senior. Friday's graduation. And also the homecoming football game in grad school. And the Alumni Association will be hitting you up for your money on Saturday. Rachel Maddow came in every night that week to practice overcoming her biggest fear, the teleprompter. I stayed late, again, on Friday. What do you think? Rachel asked me. Who cares? I answered. What do you think? She straightened her practice script by tapping it against the anchor desk, like an anchor does, and said, I think this is the greatest invention in the history of mankind. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed nearly all of our music. Mr. Ray on guitars, bass, and drums, and Mr. Chanel on the orchestration and the keyboards, produced by TKO Brothers. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions, arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. My announcer today was also Nancy Faust. Everything else was pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for this, the 99th day until the 2024 presidential election, the 1,300th day since convicted felon Donald J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the September 18th sentencing hearing. Use the mental health system. You've got it, President Biden. Use presidential immunity to stop him from doing it again while we still can. Also, Republicans, please stop shooting at Trump. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Till the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck. Or am I a Keith Olbermann replicant?